Welcome to BioIT World's Trends from the Trenches podcast, your insider's look at the science, technology, and executive trends driving the life sciences. I'm Allison Proffitt, editor of BioIT World. This episode is hosted by Stan Gloss, founder of BioTeam, a life sciences IT consulting company at the intersection of science, data, and technology. Joining Stan today is Ruth Marinshaw, CTO of Research Computing at Stanford University. Together, they explore what FAIR means at Stanford and how to build an infrastructure that will support a diverse population of researchers in academia. Let's listen in.
Well, good afternoon, Ruth. I am so excited to have you as a guest on my podcast. I think back, it's got to be at least 20 years that we've known each other. I remember you back at UNC, and I'm really excited to learn more about the challenges in the academic community. We spend a lot of time talking about pharmaceuticals and startups and biotechs, and believe it or not, you're the first person that we're talking to about the world of academia. So maybe you can introduce yourself and let's get started.
Sure. Stan, thank you for setting this up and for convincing me that I should do this. I appreciate that. Like you said, we've known each other about 20 years. I remember Dan Reed had come to Chapel Hill from NCSA to start RENC. And in addition to being the inaugural director of the Renaissance Computing Institute, he was also the CIO at UNC Chapel Hill. And we engaged with the bio team on one of the first projects that was, I think it involved RENC as well as MCNC or the NC Supercomputing Center. I don't remember, quite frankly, all the players, but I remember the bio team engagement very well. And I think it's fantastic we've stayed in touch all of these years. But you asked me to introduce myself.
Yes, please.
I am Ruth Marinshaw. I am the CTO for Research Computing here at Stanford University, and I've been here for almost 12 years now. It'll be 12 years in July. Some days it seems like a year, and some days it seems like 30 years that I've been here. Before that, my work career and academic career were at Chapel Hill. Go Tar Heels.
Yeah, for sure.
Now I'm a Cardinal. So
yeah, well, you got to change your stripes there, right?
I guess.
So anyway, like I said in the beginning, we really haven't spoken to too many people in the academic world in terms of what research computing is like. So maybe you can kind of give us a flavor of what are some of the things that you and has done in academia in a place like Stanford with such a diverse population of researchers that you must support. You have medical schools and all kinds of things going on. So maybe you could talk about a little bit about the work that you do and the challenges that you face.
Yeah, sure. So for those who aren't as familiar with academic research computing, just about all research universities, whether they're Carnegie Research One universities or Research Two, even some community colleges and smaller institutions have some form of centralized offering to help support computational and data analytic work, often focused on research, sometimes combined with academic, because our students have to learn the tools of the trade for computing and analytics. But here at Stanford, research computing is really pretty new. When I came here 12 years ago, that was to start research computing. And Stan, by any measure of scientific success, Stanford didn't need centralized research computing. There was computing out the wazoo, all over campus, distributed across the 7 schools, in individual labs and the like. But other universities had started centralized offerings to support research, realizing at the time what all of us know now, that there are a lot of economies of scale to be gained, right, from sharing compute resources, making sure there aren't idle cycles, and also for using your computing platforms as ways to bring together people doing different kinds of research who may not have known each other and find compatible or similar interests. So we provide centralized computing largely in the form of compute clusters, traditional condo model computing, where there is a university buy-in to infrastructure accompanied by individual researchers making procurements, putting everything together. Our team provides system administration. We provide consultation to students, postdocs, faculty who are trying to use the environment. We have storage services. We have some onboarding services. We have 2 data centers. Actually, we have 3 data centers just for research equipment. We help people get going on scale. So, this is a vast research enterprise. Stanford is, amazing research, as you said, spanning multiple domains. And so it can be challenging, actually, to think about how you craft an infrastructure that will meet needs, but also can be manageable and scalable and the like. Mind you, we don't only offer central computing. There are some folks who think there should be one ring to rule them all, and so we could have one campus cluster that everyone must use. No. There are all kinds of research going on, right? And there are good reasons people may need their own infrastructure or their own bespoke infrastructure. If they do, we can help manage it. But we're not here to solve everybody's problem, but we're here to offer ways to help expedite their research and provide, something that they don't have to focus on. Our faculty are here to do research and to teach, not to run computer systems, right? So we hope we're a value add, but it's tough when the needs of the digital humanist are not the same as the needs of the computational chemist, which are not the same needs as a person coming in with high-risk data from a healthcare system or something.
So it's so funny because you describe what a lot of organizations call shadow IT. It sounds like you got a lot of shadow going on.
We do, but I don't know that I would call it shadow IT. I would call it, parallel and important. Sometimes I think shadow IT, people think, well, if those people just understood, we could shut them down. We understand that there are needs that we can't and shouldn't meet. So I guess I call it parallel IT more than shadow IT.
Oh, that's a great point. And it's interesting because from my experience working in academic environments, PIs tend not to like to share. They actually like having their own resources because they feel like they need to have that control. They've gotten grant money and they have specialized needs. So, how do you provide a service that people say, it's just easier to go to Ruth than to do it myself? It's almost like the days when Napster was popular and Steve Jobs decided to come out with iTunes and do something different that made things just easier and migrate away from, going rogue. So how do you do that, and how do you market yourselves to those potential clients?
Yeah, it's hard, and what you described is not atypical, right? And I will say, when we started the program again 12 years ago, we had to build that trust. Start with a small environment, the configuration of which was heavily influenced by a group of faculty, right? So you build partnerships. You listen to their expertise. Guess what, Stan? I've been doing this forever, but some of these faculty invented the things we're deploying. So that's another thing I love about being at Stanford. I learn something every day, and I learn from our faculty. So we engaged, we built a small infrastructure. We built trust by not going out and advertising broadly until we could demonstrate success. And from there, kind of word of mouth makes a big difference. You build a cadre of willing participants. And if you can make them happy, they are the best advertisement that we have. That being said, it's not an environment for everyone, but what we also did in the primary cluster environment, again, we run lots of things, but this condo model that's been around in academia for a long time, where the financial contributions and the procurement of the various, computers is a partnership between the university and the PI.
Mm-hmm.
The faculty member owns, or their grant owns, right? What they procure, it gets added to the mix. But if they're not happy, they can take their toys and go home, essentially. Now, it's a little harder if you have a chassis with 4 servers bought by 4 different people. But, at the simplest case, they can. But that, how compute clusters work, and you have a job scheduler going on. Those who buy in, or those partners, they still have control to a large degree over how their assets get used.
Mm-hmm.
They set the parameters for how long a job can run, how many cores per lab member or an individual job can have. And then we also have a lot of data that can demonstrate to them that they're actually getting more value by being part of a collective than on their own, because if Dr. Stan buys a server and Dr. Ruth does, when Dr. Stan isn't using his, Dr. Ruth can use it. But as soon as Stan wants to use it, Ruth gets queued again, and you checkpoint your jobs and start all over. So it takes a while, though, Stan. It really does, because to your point, people are used to doing their own thing, and it is wonderful to have control. I mean, at the end of the day, the faculty member, it's her career, it's her job, it's her students' livelihood, their degrees, and that's on the line. And it's hard to give up that control. So you have to build slowly and demonstrate success, but also understand you're not always going to be successful.
And that's okay.
I'd rather always be successful, but guess what? We're human. So
yeah. So that's really interesting. So we've talked about the compute side of things. And obviously, from my world, data centers and computational infrastructures have now, over the years that we've known each other, first they were kind of relegated to IT, but now it's almost like the computational infrastructure is a lab instrument. It's so integrated into, you can't do confocal microscopy without a significant infrastructure to do that. There's so much work that now is so computationally intensive just to do the minimum, that now that kind of infrastructure is essential, isn't it?
It's essential at different points along the pipeline. I think that's absolutely true. And it's interesting, I think, because what you described sounds very generic, but every use case is slightly different, right? In part because of the people, right? There's always a people factor. Well, I don't want to give up. In part, just structural challenges, and I mean physical structural challenges. Dr. Stan, who's in a newer building where the networking capabilities are better, newer, more current, versus Dr. Ruth, who's in one of the oldest buildings that's slated to be demolished and rebuilt in 5 years, where the supporting network infrastructure isn't up to today's standards. And if that's where your confocal microscope is located and you've got to get your data out of there, there are different sets of challenges, I guess. But I think you're right. And this challenge of data. So the computation, not that computation is a completely solved problem, but there's a lot known. And you know what? Condo clusters or clusters have been around a long time. There are nuances, but to a certain extent, a cluster is a cluster. The volume of data, the challenges because of physical infrastructure, the supporting, instrument workstations, networking, all of these things. And then the regulations and requirements around data sharing, replicability of analyses and the like. It's stunning and actually kind of cool how important all aspects of the data pipeline or life cycle have become. And in some cases, a faculty member we were talking with a few weeks ago pointed out, not there isn't always a data lifecycle, right? We think about, well, data get collected, however, or generated however they are, and then they get analyzed, and then there's a publication, and then you put your data out for sharing, and then maybe you put it out to cold storage and you don't touch it again. It's kind of archived, or you decide to delete it. There's a natural in quotes life cycle where at the end of the day, the data is either at rest somewhere, shared somewhere, or gotten rid of. She said, well, we're going to always be building this longitudinal data set. It happened to be related to medicine. So she said, I don't actually ever see there being an end to that life cycle. We're never going to want to get rid of any of these data or put any of these data out to pasture, so to speak. So I think the increased importance of data has had a lot of implications for us. This is probably true across industry and the like as well. That, you think of a traditional HPC cluster, Stan, where you've got your home directories and then you've got your scratch space. And well, if you lose your data, you just go regenerate it. You can't always. It's now very expensive and sometimes impossible to reacquire or regenerate your data. And it's, I think, also now, because of this increased importance of data, the sharing of data, all of the regulations around data retention and the like, partnerships between the computing people and the information scientists and library professionals who are really good at metadata and kind of data activities writ large become even more important.
So it sounds like you're describing an integrated team approaching both compute and data as a system. It's not one or the other, but it sounds like, that it requires this certain degree of communication to make the whole thing work.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you that it requires a certain degree of communication. I'm not sure that it necessarily requires integration. Certainly touch points, but I'm not sure I'm willing to say at this point it requires integration.
Okay. A lot of people talk about fair, data being fair. What does data being fair mean to you at Stanford?
Well, let me see which hat I want to put on. The goals of FAIR are really, I think, wonderful, right? You want data to be generated, used, collected, whatever, and reused. It's expensive to develop data. It's expensive to curate data. It's expensive to make it usable and well documented and the like. And you want science results to be replicated or extended and the like. I don't want to say that the vision of FAIR is a fairy tale, but I think it's not as easy as it sounds. Oh, it sounds, well, we're going to have data be findable and accessible and interoperable and reusable. And it kind of reminds me of early days of cloud, where people are like, well, if we just move our compute to the cloud, I can think magical thoughts and the cloud will solve them, right? And if I just make my data fair, it's a lot of work. It's no small task. And I think we're a long way away from that. Now, at Stanford, I would say we are in many ways, this is an advantaged campus, and it's a magical place. It's kind of like Disney World in some ways. But that's a story for a different podcast. But we have centers for reproducible science, and we have a lot of faculty whose research domains are around data and metadata. We have a keen emphasis on open science and open source and the like, and combined plus a super strong research library. Stanford University libraries are just fantastic, and the medical library, Lane Library, and School of Medicine has a lot of data experts. So I think we are very advantaged But given all of those advantages, it's still hard. I think this is the kind of problem that we can talk about the big picture, but you kind of have to attack things in maybe not baby steps, but small chunks. I am sure I will no longer be working when the FAIR challenge is resolved, solved, put to bed, and the next acronym comes out. But it's not something compute people can do on their own. We have, again, experts in metadata, in how you think about and how you share data. Compute has a piece. Compute professionals, research computing professionals have a piece. But a lot of this, I'm quite happy, is not the problem. It's the opportunity for our libraries and for us to work with them.
So I would be remiss having somebody from Silicon Valley on a podcast and not ask about AI and what AI is all about at an institution like Stanford.
Oh, it's such an exciting time, right? To be in tech, and again, I mentioned Stanford as the Disney World. Wow. In the AI realm, it's an exaggeration, Stan, but not by much. That truly every week there's some big AI workshop, seminar, symposium. This week was, I think, the fifth or sixth of AIME, which is AI in Medical Imaging program here at Stanford, and just a full day of magnificent talks and panels about leveraging AI technologies in medicine and healthcare and the various challenges, opportunities, and the like. We have what we call HAI, H-A-I, the Human-Centered AI Institute, that is headed by Fei-Fei Li and John Echemende. We have world-class AI scientists, plus a large cadre of very prolific and dedicated researchers and faculty who are focusing as much on the ethical uses of AI, the opportunities, the challenges, as anything else. So on one hand, that's great. There's a lot of wonderful things that will come from AI. There are lots of concerns and lots of guardrails and the like. But on the computational side, the infrastructure side, it presents a whole new set of challenges for us, kind of at the nuts and bolts level, right? Because from a facility perspective, from a financial perspective, these systems and capabilities are not inexpensive. Mm-hmm. The disparity between the capabilities that one can realistically hope to have local to a campus, in contrast to what industry can deliver, the hyperscalers and the big Silicon Valley companies in terms of AI-focused infrastructure to drive science. It's really kind of scary and disturbing as well. And to me, it points out the necessity really to have programs like NAIR, the National AI Research Resource, that is piloting now in a partnership between many government agencies and many private companies as well. And Stanford faculty were among those whose activism and eye on what was needed really led to the legislation that is behind NAIR. So I think, campus computing will still, of course, be important, but no single campus can deliver the AI resources at the scale that we really need to continue to drive science forward.
Well, Ruth, that's really a great place. I'm going to leave it right there because I think that was a beautiful ending. And I wanted to say thank you so much for this great conversation, and thank you for being a dear friend. And I hope everybody enjoyed that. And maybe we can have you back to continue this conversation, because I have a feeling there's more, but stay tuned.
I will. Thank you for the opportunity, Stan. And next Jackson Browne concert surely is just around the corner.
I'll see you there.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to BioIT World's Trends from the Trenches podcast.